You know, as if I have to do this, one of the things I want to do here today is articulate a vision for our organization. I think you've certainly heard that vision for the last 20 plus years from the person that just left the stage. But I just want to talk about some things as the drug development process is evolving, as the way we look at this disease is evolving, just some things that are changing within the organization and some things we're trying to do, particularly in trying to leverage the different relationships we have and really try to address remaining problems that we can help get off the table and make all this process much easier. So as far as who we are and why we're here, some number of years ago, maybe more than many of you in the audience might remember, this gentleman, Admiral James Stockdale, was Ross Perot's vice presidential candidate. And you might remember in the vice presidential candidate debate, he came up to the microphone and said, "Who am I and why am I here?" So I think, you know, trying to define that, certainly because of the person that just left the stage, you don't have to ask that question about PPMD. I think it's very clear, you know, who we are and why we're here, based on this person that just sat down from the stage. And so I told her this morning that since she used the slide with my picture yesterday, that I was going to kind of up the ante. And so I think we all know Pat is an overachieving DMD advocate. So, enough on pictures. Don't worry, everybody else in the organization, there's no more pictures of anybody. So, why are we here? I think the message is plastered in banners all over this hotel. And that is the end Duchenne mechanism, end Duchenne goal. And so, you know, you have to ask, I think we need to constantly step back and ask questions about what we're doing and how we can be the most effective and look at other ways. And part of that is what the topic that I'm talking about here today is trying to leverage relationships and then look at gaps. So it's really essential. You know, it's easy to think about drug development. Let me find the pointer here a second. It's really easy to think about drug development as an A to B process, that you've got these different steps that lots of people have stepped up to this podium and talked about it, and that'll happen over the next couple of days too, where foundations and companies are investing in drug development programs. And certainly that's good. You want to try to make this process move as quickly as possible, be efficient as possible, try to get the best drugs out of the pipeline at the end that are truly effective and make a difference for all people living with Duchenne. But you know, there's another important part of this, and that is all this other stuff. So you hear about natural history, you hear about registry. Lee Sweeney talked about the independent replication program yesterday. Basically, the path from A to B does not happen unless you try to put these other things in place to facilitate that process. And yes, these other things may not be sexy as far as thinking about investments that PPMD can make, but these other things are really what's going to make the pipeline move. We're going to get better and better with the next drug, the better these resources are. The better tools we put in place, the better resources we put in place, this process is going to get more efficient. So, you know, just kind of keep in mind that I think a big part of our mission, and certainly the way we've approached things, is that we not only have to facilitate the development of the drug itself, like choose to back particular drug development programs, but that we also have to help put these kinds of things in place. And so going from having foundations and companies invest in drug programs, which you're going to hear a lot about the next several days, just remember that we have to collaborate to invest in infrastructure that helps all drug programs move along well. And I'd try to make the argument that that's better, because then no matter who comes along, they've got a better chance of moving their drug through the development process to a successful conclusion if we take this kind of approach. Okay? So I warned Ed Kaye that this was coming. He said this to me several years ago, and I think he said this publicly at meetings, which is one reason why I didn't feel too bad quoting him without totally clearing it with Ed. But the idea is that Genzyme had a very successful program for developing the drug myosin for Pompe's disease. So this is another muscle disease. Successful program. This is one of the few approved drugs for a muscle disease. So this is the kind of model that we might want to look at here. But what Ed said was that Genzyme may have never, so they were naive. Where is Ed? They were admitting that they were naive, okay? And he said that they may never have launched a program that turned out to be successful if they knew what a barrier it was to not know these things, to not have a registry to be able to get to the patients, to not have natural history data that would let you understand what endpoints to aim at that might change during the course of your trial so you could see them being modulated. And so then endpoints to use. So again, infrastructure matters. I mean, these things are really important when we stand up here and talk with you about what Duchenne Connect is doing, what benefit risk is doing. You know, this is infrastructure that's kind of helping everybody's drug development program. Wrong button. Okay, so why are we here? It really comes down to that do we back, as an organization, research and development programs? Do we make investments? Absolutely. You know, absolutely we're interested in this. All foundations are interested in this. All the companies in the room, all the stakeholders in this room are interested in that. We just have to remember that we also have to make investments in new resources and tools that help regardless of the company, regardless of the target, regardless of the therapeutic development strategy, the therapeutic modality, whether we're talking about gene therapy, whether we're talking about a drug that upregulates dystrophin, utrophin, a drug that addresses, that's an anti-inflammatory, these kinds of tools are going to need to be put in place to help. Fortunately, we're actually in really good shape when it comes to Duchenne. So Annie Kennedy and I were at a meeting that's called, correct me if I don't get this right, Annie, Clinical Trial Transformation Initiative, okay? And they put up the basic pipeline that we see hundreds of times, okay, going from discovery through post-marketing. They put up this basic pipeline. And then they mapped onto the slide all the things that a patient advocacy group could do to help support the therapy development pipeline. Okay, how to make A to B run easier, as I've been talking about in my talk so far. And you know, when Annie and I looked at this, we looked at each other and we said, we're doing most of that. Okay, we're putting most of these things in place already. And I've just kind of highlighted some of them, the validation and replication study services that Lee talked about yesterday, Duchenne Connect Registry, how Duchenne Connect helps with recruitment with companies that approach us, our federal agency partnering, so dealing with Muscular Dystrophy Coordinating Committee, FDA, CDC, different parts of the NIH and Department of Defense, as you've already heard some of this from Pat. Community engagement, engaging with all of you to help with education of trials, help understanding of trials, and thereby help recruitment. So we are evolving. What we're doing is we're asking questions. What gaps are we not filling in this therapy development pipeline, and how can we collaborate with other groups, with companies, to help address these gaps? That is really an important mission for us right now on how we can fill this out. So a number of things that are going on. I'm not going to say much about them because you've heard a lot about it already, and I know we're already way over, so I'm trying to kind of motor through this. Annie Kennedy has been working with newborn screening. This is a massive effort. Getting into the newborn screening data set, I'm using the wrong word. I can't think of the right word, Annie. Yeah. The recommended standards for state screening panels, getting Duchenne on that is going to be a major, major effort. But just think how important that's going to be. Drugs can be delivered earlier because we'll know about the onset of Duchenne earlier. And very likely that's going to make them more effective if we can get to that earlier. So it's a massive effort. There's a number of different collaborators. Again, Annie probably talked about this a lot yesterday. I had to be in a different meeting when she spoke. But that's an important barrier that we can help address. Again, to just kind of motor through these. Kathy Kinnett has been working, she's talked about the certified Duchenne care centers. So not only are we standardizing care across different sites, but think what that does for clinical trials. That means there's less variability from site to site when the drug is tested at those different sites. That variability in how children are cared for at different clinical centers can actually kill a clinical trial. Because if there's enough variability in care, that can mask a drug effect. So this is hugely important too, that we put this kind of thing in place. One thing that's been, wrong button. One thing that's been being worked on with that, Kathy is talking with folks about having a central IRB. So instead of going through approval at each of our sites, the certified Duchenne care centers, there'll be one site. You get the protocol approved there, and you won't have to jump through the hoops at your 5 or 6 or however many other clinical trial sites you have. And there's going to be some discussions at this meeting about site certification and how different groups can work together to help that happen. Pat's already mentioned the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, and I wasn't sure if Pat knew what the acronym stood for. She keeps quoting the acronym, but it's National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, and that was a terrific meeting. So I've been around this disease a long time, and I learned more in a day and a half about cardiac issues in Duchenne in that one meeting than I'd learned in all the time before. So she really put together an excellent panel working with the collaborators that Pat mentioned, and we're getting all sorts of different things out of that meeting. Kathy's chaperoning working groups to do everything from what to measure in the mouse models all the way to what sorts of endpoints to use in clinical trials. So I think there's going to be a lot coming out of that. And she's just launching an effort with arthritis, musculoskeletal and skin diseases, child health, and digestive disorders and kidney disease with those institutes to address bone health. Very little known about bone health for Duchenne. And I think we really have to look at that carefully, and that's going to impact care and treatment. I think what's going to come out, we're working on trying to get a workshop with these institutes. And combination therapies has been mentioned. Jill Raphael Fortney did a great job about talking about combination therapies yesterday. We're working with the NIH. We recognize that there's additional regulatory issues that we're going to have to address for combination therapies. We're also trying to learn from other diseases, and we have a number of people in our organization engaged in this, and we've been talking. We just had a conversation with TreatedMD this morning, and they're very interested in this, so we're going to try to collaborate with them on combination therapies as well. And finally, the Drug Development Roundtable. This has been mentioned a couple of times. We're bringing together 27 companies at a side meeting, at this meeting, to talk about how we can do these types of pre-competitive space things together. If you're pursuing a biomarker, that's not specific to a particular candidate therapy. That's something that would help everybody's therapeutic candidate. So maybe we can work together and try to make it to advance on the biomarker effort. So a number of regulatory tools that have been talked about. I'll just kind of go through quickly. Draft guidance, you just heard a lot talked about. We're trying to facilitate biomarker identification and qualification. What PPMD can do is we can bring in consultants that have experience in that. We can try to get people to share experiences. And so there's a number of different biomarkers that we can try to qualify, and this is just a list of some of the ones that we're interested in. We're also working with 2 different collaborations with Susan Ward with the CTAP project and with the Critical Path Institute. PPMD is involved in both efforts, as well as a lot of other partners, including a lot of the companies at this meeting are involved in these efforts. And we're trying to develop a disease progression model. And without taking the time to explain that, we're just trying to make clinical trials easier by better understanding what the progression, being better able to predict the progression based on some early biomarker data is really what we're trying to get at. And then we're going to plug that into clinical trials as an additional tool. We're doing more outreach lately. We just had a meeting with the Dutch Duchenne Parent Project on assistive devices, that we're doing initiatives in that, and we potentially may collaborate with Duchenne Parent Project. We're still, last night I talked with our scientific advisory committee about an initiative on assistive devices. So we're looking at what else we may be able to do in this space. With the MDA, lots of people say to us, can you try to break down the fragmentation among the different foundations? And we're trying to do that. We're trying to reach out. We're talking with the Muscular Dystrophy Association about developing a memorandum of understanding. Our attorney just produced a draft of that and trying to improve collaborations there. And I think that's potentially important. And then finally, with the companies, we have this new way of working with companies where we're trying to share our expertise as much as possible with, the way I put this is, we don't want clinical trials to fail for stupid reasons. And if PPMD staff collectively, if the expertise that we have assembled can meet with companies, look at their clinical trial protocols and give them advice, and we can save a trial of a potentially good drug from failing for kind of a stupid design reason, we want to do that. I mean, we're really interested in doing those sorts of things, and that's part of our evolving model. This may be one of the things that's been changing the quickest, and Kaylin's been doing a great job working with Kim, Pat, everybody in the organization to try to push this program along so we can better work with industry. Okay, finally, last slide. The path forward. What do I see as the path forward for us as an organization and for all the stakeholders in this field? So I think, first of all, we got to collaborate on tools and resources. We got to try to make things more available so that there's better knowledge, better tools to run clinical trials, so that we give them the best chance for success possible. We don't know what drugs or drug combinations will work, and this is one reason that we really have to work together. I mean, as was said, as Ron said, there's high failure rate in drug development, and just when you look at the statistics, there's a very high failure rate. We don't know what's going to work, so that's one thing that's going to have to motivate us toward collaboration. So what we have to do is we have to facilitate all drug development efforts, test the drugs rigorously, and then take the benefit from those that work. Thanks.